When you see the cover of this VHS tape, what do you think the contents of it are? Something friendly, maybe for kids, or something the whole family can enjoy? And you would be right in thinking that. The music featured in said tape is very much upbeat and cheery, and the footage you're seeing right now is a music video from said tape. The YouTuber H-Bomber Guy admittedly passively mentioned this tape in his video, and briefly talked about how a Christian cult used this as some sort of propaganda for their cult, and naturally this piqued my interest, and so I started doing some research. But little did I know that this innocent looking collection of videos has ties to something sinister. In this video, we'll be diving into the cult known as the Children of God, going over its history, the bizarre, overly religious practices, how they've abducted children, and overall how they've taken Christian values and negatively twisted them to justify their disgusting desires. David Berg. The man who started the cult in 1968, the cult has gone by various different names like the Family of Love and Teens for Christ, just to name a few, but I'll be referring to it as the Children of God, or COG for short. David was a former pastor for the Christian and Missionary Alliance, and the cult has its roots in California, specifically Huntington Beach, where they would meet up in a local coffee house. They would mainly stay in this area until 1969, where David Berg would then have the revelation that California would be hit by a major earthquake, and as a result, he left and took his followers on the road. On the travel, they would then start spreading the word by hitting the streets, roaming highways, and turning up at public events, giving out pamphlets. And when any group expands, some sort of leadership needs to be in place in order for there to be some sort of direction for the movement, and the Children of God cult is no different. Their leaders were referred to as the Chain, and them along with the members would eventually found communes in various locations not only in the US but around the world, and a sense of community was forming. Since social media didn't exist back then, in order for David Berg, who's the de facto leader of the entire group, to communicate with his followers, he would send out letters, and this series of letters would be referred to as the Mo letters. Collectively, they believed in the same things, thus having the same religious practices, and some are quite odd to say the least, but there's two in specific that I wanted to talk about: flirty fishing and loving Jesus. According to X Family, flirty fishing was a form of religious practiced by COG from 1974 until 1987, and it was apparently discontinued due to the AIDS epidemic of that time. Female members of the cult were essentially told to be hookers for Jesus, and the use of their sexual attraction along with intercourse were used to convert people and gain favors. Quote, this was given to complete strangers in combination with a request for a donation or for a required fee in line with escort servicing. Flirty fishing was widely used as a way to raise money for the cult and resulted in many of the second generation births known as Jesus babies. Internal family records from 1988 indicate that over 223,000 quote-unquote fish, which were targets of flirty fishing, were loved between 1978 and 1988. Flirty fishing was one of the instances the cult used the Bible and took its original context and twisted it to satisfy their strange practices. This practice has its roots in the book of Matthew, specifically in chapter 4, and let me quickly give you some context. After Jesus was tempted in the desert and after having traveled a bit, he began to preach and spread the gospel, and in doing so, Jesus wanted some help. Walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers who were fishermen, and then the following happened. Come follow me, Jesus said, and I will send you out to fish for people. And in other versions it says, follow me and I will make you fishers of men. Jesus wasn't literally saying that they were gonna grab some fishing rods and start fishing for people, but it was a metaphor. He was basically saying for Peter and Andrew to follow him to spread the gospel. However, the cult took this and twisted it and made it into for Jesus, aka flirty fishing, basically saying the woman in the cult will quote unquote fish for people through to spread the gospel. Obviously, this is weird as heck, but this isn't even as bad or weird as some of the other things this cult has done, so let me introduce you to loving Jesus. Loving Jesus is a doctrine first introduced in 1995, and the term itself is used by the cult to describe their relationship with Jesus. It's described by COG to be a radical form of bridal theology. Although the Bible mentions how Jesus is essentially the bridegroom and the church, which are the people who believe in him, are the bride, this theme doesn't necessarily represent a literal marriage between Jesus and his followers, but more so how our relationship with him has to be that of a strong, faithful marriage, an admittedly pretty beautiful metaphor. One example of this bride and bridegroom symbolism in the Bible is found in Matthew 25 in the parable of the 10 virgins, where it's implied that the bridegroom character represents Jesus. The cult takes all of this and twists it by teaching their followers to imagine themselves having sex with Jesus during intercourse, and they're also instructed to talk dirty to him as well. This applies to both men and women, although men are required to imagine themselves as women to avoid having homosexual thoughts of any kind, since the cult prohibits it. Until this point, everything you heard of could have admittedly be seen as just strange, overly deviant religious practices based in Christianity. Our early years are some of the most important for the development of who we eventually become, and I think why we're so adamant in protecting children from certain types of people and information is because we want to teach them right from wrong in a way that's intuitive and helpful in their development. When it comes to topics like among other themes that are considered to be more adult, we want to teach these concepts when the time is right. Tying this back to the cult, there's a detail I left out about the loving Jesus doctrine, which involves minors. This practice is taught to all members. This can include children as young as 12. Now let's backtrack a bit to the topic of sex ed in general. I remember having this class in middle school, the time in a teen's life where puberty starts kicking in, and I remember them teaching it to us in an objective and easy to understand way. When it comes to teaching this topic at a younger age, I believe we should leave out going overly into detail about things like we've forgotten the different sites, different types of shit, hookup culture, and whatever else that strays away from the objective point of what sex is, how it works, relationships, and fundamental themes of that nature. Although I'm not entirely opposed to the education of the potential dangers of some of these things previously mentioned. At the end of the day, pornography is simply a stimulant for initiators. It's fiction, and most videos of that nature are over-sensationalized and doesn't reflect reality. How this all ties back into the cult is because according to X Family, all members of the age of 14 are required to read a bunch of excerpts edited specifically for them from the Good News magazine, which was basically a newspaper for the cult about the loving Jesus doctrine, and there's just so many of these excerpts, too many to go over each one, but I'll get straight to the chase. Why am I bringing up sex ed in these excerpts in the first place? First of all, when introducing the topic of sex to those who don't potentially fully understand it, it needs to be taught objectively. In the context of Christianity, there's nowhere in the Bible where it mentions, quote, "It is easy to see how most Christians would not be able to receive the idea of having an intimate love relationship with the Lord if you were plagued with guilt complexes and didn't understand the beauties of godly sex and the freedom that is allowed under the Lord's law of love. How could you ever have the faith that you can enjoy such an intimate relationship with God?" End quote. This is just one of the many excerpts that talk about this kind of relationship with God. When it comes to sex in the Christian faith, it's pretty simple how it works. It's not allowed before marriage, and it's with another literal human being, the one whom you marry, being not with, how Christianity puts it, the Father, which would be pretty weird. So to teach your young followers to have a relationship with God not only could potentially skew the concept of sex itself for them, but it's basically teaching them sex in a way, telling them to love the Father in a way. And in the context of Christianity, this would be considered immorality. I think you get my point, and I'm pretty sure you're sick of hearing my voice playing in reverse because YouTube won't let me talk about these things without getting age restricted, which, fair enough. But what if I told you things don't get any freaking better, bro? Let's now move on to the topic of child abduction. Since the early 1970s, there have been reports of children getting abducted from former members of COG and being moved to different countries to prevent law enforcement and their parents from finding them, such as the case with Nathan Berg, who was the son of Paul and Sarah Berg and the grandson of David Berg, the leader. At the time, Sarah was pregnant with Nathan, her second child. There was a member who wanted to know how to have intercourse with pregnant girls. David wanted someone to demonstrate, and Sarah's husband volunteered her to do it. She refused, and due to her refusal, she was beaten by her husband across the stomach, specifically with a 2x4 piece of wood. Needless to say, a blow to the stomach for a pregnant woman is bad to say the least, and she sought medical attention, quote, "and gave birth in a system doctor's office." And system was the term used to refer to society outside of the cult. Nathan was born, and as punishment, Sarah was kept prisoner in a trailer, and her son was taken from her. Thankfully, she would manage to escape, although without her baby. And there was a time where she came back with others to the commune she stayed in to retrieve her son, yet this would prove unsuccessful, and ever since her escape until present, she was unable to retrieve her son. X Family, the encyclopedia I got most of the info for this video from, has over 4,000 articles filled with information about the cult, and with everything I presented in this video, I merely scratched the surface. I didn't even mention how the former guitarist from the band Fleetwood Mac, Jeremy Spencer, joined the cult, or how there's a music video with a 10-year-old girl and she was only wearing a bikini, or the many books published by the cult, or some stories about former members I was able to find. When I first started doing the research for this video, I stumbled across the Wikipedia article, and as I kept on digging and doing more research, I eventually stumbled across the X Family encyclopedia, which I previously mentioned. On that site, when you go on the main page, you can literally just keep on clicking on different links, different stories, different aspects of the cult, and there was just so much to go into, way too much for me to cover in this video, or else this video would have been an hour long and I would have probably spent months on this video. Maybe I'll do a follow-up video one day, but today the cult is known as the Family International, and according to Britannica, the cult has abandoned some of its more extreme sexual practices, but it's of my personal philosophy to maintain a healthy dose of skepticism with anything, especially a group which has shady practices to say the least. Overall, I hope this video highlighted some of the twisted things that happen that only rarely come to light. I'm trying to work on my script, trying to make everything flow nice, but bro, my next video, bro, we're gonna expose some of the bull crap that I found on YouTube. The Elsa Gate stuff, you know, the Poppy Playtime stuff, and some my last Elsa Gate video, right, there was some channels that I mentioned. They are continuously uploading, and I'm going to expose each and every single one of the ones that I found while doing my research, and I'm going to try to expose every single one that I can. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you who have clicked on this video. Go check out my last video if you want. Follow me on Twitter. I got Patreon if you want to support me there. I don't know. I got nothing else to say. See you guys later. See you later, guys. Bye. When I'm on YouTube, I be like Swanane, eating my chicken noodle soup just like Swanane. When I hit that name.